I'm Lynda. I'm an alcoholic. I belong here.
Yes, you do.
Yes, I do. I remember when Mike came to Swedish Ballard Hospital, my home group. There is Just Keep It Simple. And I remember him carrying around little 10-minute coins. And he was giving out 10-minute coins. And I had never seen one. I had never had one, but I got one and I still have it because I still need it at times, you know. If you see a little dribble of blood coming down here, I'm not having a stroke. It's just nerves. Really, it's just nerves. So I am Lynda. I am an alcoholic. My recovery date is January 1, 2013. Doesn't seem like that long ago. Had a few relapses, you know, but that's my most recent date. I have a sponsor whom I adore. My first sponsor passed away a few years ago, about 3 years ago. And I sponsor women, and I love service. I really, really love service. And, you know, I've always been a helper. I've always been a helper. When I was a little girl, my parents bought a brand new house in a brand new subdivision up in Coquitlam, up in BC. And my dad was putting in a yard and then building a fence. And I was out there, and I was all 2 years old, and I was helping him. I've always wanted to be a helper. But then I started helping myself. You know, I started pretty young helping myself, to the detriment of others. My first addiction is sugar. It's still a strong addiction for me. And it first became apparent when I was about 3, because I remember stealing my brother's Halloween candy and hiding it. I remember that. I was telling my mom just yesterday about all of my early life memories, because I have a bunch from when I was about 1.5 up through about 3. Really, really strong memories. And I forgot to tell her that one. But that, you know, that was when my life of crime began, when I was about 3. And, you know, 3-year-olds know what's wrong, right? We somehow or another know right from wrong. And I knew enough to lie and hide things when I was 3 years old. But jump forward a little bit to when I started, you know, stealing cigarettes from my dad when I was, I don't know, 11, 12, something like that. Started stealing my mom's pills. She needed medications, and I started stealing her medications when I was a teenager. I didn't know what they were. She had a lot. There were a lot of different colors. And I just would try whatever. It's like, oh, that one didn't do anything except turn my pea green. Didn't change how I felt, so I didn't take it anymore. But the ones that changed how I felt, I kept taking those. I kept taking them. And, you know, like most kids, I, sneaked booze, watered the bottles down, the typical stuff that a lot of kids do. And by the time I was in high school, I was about 15, I think, when I started. I know that this is an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, but drugs are a part of my story too, and I wouldn't be quite the alcoholic that I am if I had not been doing the drugs that helped me do the alcohol. But I was smoking a lot of weed, and by the time I was a junior in high school, I was smoking it every day. My grades had plummeted completely. I don't know anybody who's an alcoholic who's dumb. There are probably some out there, but my experience, my observation is that we are all pretty dang smart people. And yeah, I was a good student, but my grades plummeted, my interest in school plummeted, my interest in music plummeted. And I come from a really, really musical family. And I was a victim. I remember well, I have one brother. He's just a little under 3 years older than me, and he was always a great student as well. And I would follow him in school, and the teachers would say, "Oh, you're John's little sister. You'll do great. He's wonderful." And I remember thinking, "The heck I will." Well, that wasn't the words I used, but we are being recorded, so. Um, it's just I had a grudge. I carried a grudge against my brother because he was he was the shining star, I thought. Well, turns out that he got caught for drinking and he got caught for drugging, but I didn't know it because he was really smart. He kept it a secret from me, right? I thought that I was the only sneaky one in the family. Um, that 17 years, at 17 years old, I really went downhill, and I'm not entirely certain why. But I really started hanging out with the wrong people. I really started doing the wrong stuff. And, by the time it was time for me to start my senior year, I didn't go back to school. And the reason I didn't is because I was on the streets in downtown Seattle. I'd been turned out as a prostitute by this guy that I thought was my boyfriend, you know? And, um, and then I thought that I got kicked out of my parents' home, but they thought I ran away. Communication was lacking. And it's something that's been a problem for me throughout my life. Um, and because I can't communicate as well as I would like to, I would drink, right? Rather than talk to people about what was happening, how I was feeling, I would drink. I would use drugs. I would use sex. I would use shopping. I would use relationships. I would use anything to get myself out from feeling the way I felt. And alcohol really was the handiest thing of all. So fast forward a little bit more, and by the time I was in my 20s, I thought I had a problem with drinking, but I really didn't do anything about it other than just say, I'm not going to do that again anytime soon, And so that began my decades of relapsing. I never went to AA, but I kept promising myself that I was going to stop drinking because it was getting worse. But it wasn't until I was in my early 50s that I finally, well, I'll tell you how I got sober and then I'll tell you what it's been like since. Um, there was a man that I was in a relationship with. The relationship had ended, but we were still really good friends. And he lived in Bellingham. And I was his healthcare agent for decisions if he weren't able to make them for himself. And I got a telephone call around 4:30 or something like that one morning from a doctor at St. Joseph's Hospital in Bellingham, and he said, "I need you to make a decision for Chip." And I was like, "What?" And he said, "Yeah, he's here in ICU, and all of his organs are failing, and we need to know what you would have us do. Do you want us to try and keep him alive, or do you want us to keep him comfortable? And I was so stunned. I didn't know what to say. And it had been a little while since I'd spoken with Chip, but I asked the doctor, I said, if this was a family member of yours, what would you do? And he said, if this was a family member of mine, I would make him comfortable because we can save him for a little while, but this is just going to happen again and again, and he's suffering. And I said, okay, make him comfortable. And what that means in hospital speak is give him morphine and help him out. That's what that means when they say we'll make him comfortable. And so I drove up to Bellingham, and he died that day. And I was holding his hand, I was looking into his eyes, and there was something happened in the room. There was something happened in the room. And it wasn't just the fact that he died. There was something else that happened, but I don't know what it was. Anyway, a week later, I went up to Bellingham to pick up his ashes, and I had this state of I can't remember what the word is, but a dissociation. I felt so dissociated, and I had his ashes in the back seat of my car, and which is exactly where he belonged because he was a terrible backseat driver, and I wasn't going to let him sit in the front seat with me anymore. Um, he really was. I put him out of my car one time when he was still alive and made him walk the rest of the way. He was such a terrible backseat driver. But I just wanted to be around people, and I didn't know a soul in Bellingham. But I remembered that he had mentioned that he had a daily AA meeting that he went to. And I had never been to an AA meeting. I didn't know anything about it other than the fact that he belonged to it. And somehow or another, in that state of dissociation, I found my way to his meeting. I didn't know that it was his meeting, but turned out it was his meeting. And I went in there and I sat down. And you know how in a lot of meetings, they ask at the beginning, are there any visitors here? Is there anybody who wants to say their name? Let us know, where you're from. And I said, I'm Lynda, and I have Chip's ashes in the back of my car, and I think this might be where he came for his meeting. They were all like, "Oh yeah, this is Chip's home group. Absolutely, we're so glad you're here." And then I just sat and listened for the rest of the meeting. I didn't say another word. But what struck me in that meeting was the level of honesty, the level of truth, the level of feeling that I had never ever experienced anywhere with anyone. Even my family that I knew of, you know. I mean, I'm sure that I had experienced it as an infant, but I'd forgotten it long ago. And I left that meeting with that feeling, and I still have it to this day. I have it in my heart, and I know damn well, darn well, that Chip got me to that meeting. Several months later, I totally bottomed out. I finally bottomed out. And I found myself, isolating the way we do. I found myself planning all of my drinking the way we do, hiding behind this facade of everything is okay the way we do. And yet I was just melting into the corner of my couch. I just was disappearing. And something happened that one day, several months after that first meeting that Chip took me to. And I've got to get to a meeting. I know I need an AA meeting. And so I spent the rest of the day trying to find a meeting. And That's when I learned what AA is. It's hidden. It's in hidden places, right? It says it's in a church, but you never enter through the main doors. It says, right? I didn't know that, right? I was going up and banging on doors and trying, and I looked all over town. And then finally I walked into a meeting. It turned out to be my home group, Living in Sobriety, in Ballard, meets at 4 o'clock every single day. And I put my stuff down on a chair and I acted like, I don't know, a snot. I just acted like a little snot, like I knew why I was there and I'd been to a meeting before, right? And this man came up to me and sat down next to me and welcomed me, and I'll never forget him. His name is Chuck, and he had really, really bad teeth, really bad teeth. There was like nothing there. And he always wore a sport jacket and shiny, shiny loafers with no socks. And he offered me an Altoid. And I don't know, I just thought that was ironic. Eventually, he got new teeth. But he'd never stopped handing out Altoids to new people when they come into meetings. I hope he's still alive. I haven't spoken with him in a while. But anyway, that was the beginning of my journey, truly in AA. And since then, I got a sponsor. She walked me through 1, 2, and 3, started me off on 4, and I was terrified, absolutely terrified. And I stopped going to meetings. I stopped calling my sponsor. I stopped checking in. I finished my service positions and didn't get any new ones. And one day I was out having lunch with my sweetheart in a place up in Edmonds, and he went to use the restroom and he came back and I had a beer in front of me. And I have no recollection of why, but that's how sneaky this disease is for me. Within 2 days, I was completely obsessing about alcohol again. I was planning everything, and I didn't go on a bender except between my ears, because that's where the benders are for me. Really, it's all between my ears. But I went and had breakfast with a friend that I didn't know well. I was just getting to know her. She was in AA, and I think she was going through the steps. I think she was maybe starting on step 4 or something like that at that time. But I was just moved over a plate of pancakes and maple syrup to ask her to sponsor me. And she said, I need to ask my sponsor. And she did. And her sponsor said, as long as you stay ahead of her, you can sponsor her. And so she did. And she's still my sponsor. She did help me have a spiritual experience. And we've been in a lot of contact recently, and I realize just how much contact with other people in AA is spiritual. It is every action that I take now, I realize, is spiritual. Every move that I make is spiritual in one way or another. And if it's a good move, then it's my higher power's will. And if it's not a good move, then it's my will. That's pretty much the way things work for me. I don't know what the right thing is all the time, but I just like when I was 3 years old, I always know what the wrong thing is. It's just, do I choose to do it or not? And if I choose to not do the wrong thing, then I must be doing God's will. That's the way I look at it. I don't know how much more time I have. 10 minutes? 10 minutes? Holy cow. Okay. All right. I'm going to read a little bit about the principles of the steps. Um, some of you have heard, Lisa mentioned it. The principle of the first step is honesty, right? We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. They say that this is the only step that we have to do perfectly, get honest. And I believe that. I came to believe that. I don't believe that it's that stopping drinking is the one thing that I have to do perfectly. I believe that getting honest is the thing that I have to do perfectly, because if I am honest, I'm not going to drink. Because if I am honest, I know that drinking is going to kill me, and I'm going to ruin my relationships, and I'm going to really mess things up. So I got to get honest. I got to stay honest, because if I'm not honest, then I can't have hope. I can't have faith. I can't have courage, integrity, willingness, humility, love, discipline, patience, and perseverance, awareness, and service. All those other spiritual principles, they're the things that have always been inside of me somewhere, you know? They really have. And it's only because of AA that I have come to recognize them, not so much in myself, but in other people. I recognize these principles in the actions of other people. And then I want to emulate them. I want to do what they do. I want to do what you do, because I love you. Ew, I can't believe I said that, right? But when I first came into AA, they were still saying, let us love you until you learn to love yourself. They said it all the time. And I've learned to love myself because I let you love me like I hadn't been loved before, except maybe by my mom when I was an infant, before I can remember. So I realize I'm all over the place, and I kind of get that way. Ask Sasha, ask Lisa, ask Sherry. um, the remaining 11 principles, hope is what I got that day that Chuck offered me an Altoid. That's what I got. He handed me a little piece of very, very curiously strong hope, you know? Faith is something that I learned about by watching you, There's a man who was in my first home group, Living in Sobriety, who said, I don't know what a higher power is. I have no idea what a higher power is. I don't know that I have faith in a higher power, but I have faith in this program. I really have faith in this program. And I hung on to that for a while, because you are a higher power. I can't do this alone, you know? And I have faith that together we can do stuff. So then that the principle behind step 4, courage, I was reminded in a meeting this morning. So I don't know whether you were still there, Lisa, but the Wizard of Oz came up, and it comes up sometimes in meetings. It frequently comes up. And there's the cowardly lion who wants courage, right? There's the Tin Man who wants a heart. He just wants a heart. And then there's the Scarecrow who really just wants a brain. He really just wants a brain. And to me, that's the Serenity Prayer right there. Mm-hmm. Those 3 characters. That's the serenity prayer. Like I say, I'm all over the place. But I just wanted to bring that up because I don't love the Wizard of Oz, but I love the feeling of it. Like I love the feeling of being with you. This is a good place. This is a spiritual place. I used to go dancing every single week, several times a week. And I considered that my church because dancing is very spiritual to me. Music is very spiritual to me. But now I've got AA. And that's spiritual too. Okay, last thing I'll say is about my home group meeting now. Just keep it simple. We meet on Saturdays on Zoom right now. But on Sundays, we are now back at Swedish Valley Hospital, which is where it's been for over 40 years, right? There used to be a treatment program there for men and women, but there's not anymore. Now there's a treatment program only for pregnant women. But that is a really, really important treatment program. Those women are mostly drug addicts, and they're in there to save their lives so they can show up for their babies and their other children. I've been taking a panel in there for about 10 years now, and I never want to go. I never want to go. And I'm always glad I do. It's a great service. So anyway, I'm grateful for AA, and I'm really, thank you for asking me, Mike, to
For
share.
showing up and suiting up.
Yeah, thanks for the 10-minute coin. I should have used it. I think I'm done. Yeah.